This is the I Read Comic Books podcast. I am your host, Mike Rappin. With me this week are two dollar bin comics you only bought for the cover, Nick White.
Hey.
And Kate Lamphere.
Hi.
Thank you both for joining me this week. I'm very excited to be talking about comic books with the both of you. It is episode 262. Let's get into the thing that I have to ask every week. How have you been? How have comic books been? Let's start with you, Nick.
Things have been fine. Michigan Weather Watch is definitely a segment in full effect for today. At present, it is blowing outside. Yeah, it's not good. We have a high wind warning for those who need this. It remains in effect until 10 p.m. this evening. So,
wow.
For those of you listening, a broken clock is right twice a day, so maybe this forecast pertains to you. So I don't want to hear anything about, oh, Nick, I'm going to listen to this 4 days later. Mm-hmm, no, this could be pertinent. So,
you never know.
If you aren't sure, just go stick your head outside. So... yeah, beyond that, shitty weather means I just end up reading more, which is perfectly fine, and I've been getting a good amount of that done. I read Rye number 9 recently. I know it seems like I'm a broken record, but honestly, this book is really, really, really good. So I got, for those of you saying this isn't out, we got an advance copy. And I think people who have enjoyed this book are going to find it just continues to be absolutely fantastic. And what I like about this issue is that we've seen in the Rye series, this most recent one, that Rye has really tried to he doesn't really want to be the leader anymore. He doesn't really want to be a fighter anymore. And it's not like that sort of like bullshit moody stuff where someone is like, I swear off all weapons and I'm never gonna fight again and I just want to run my yoga studio or whatever.
Right.
Like he's just like, you know what, like it's not really my thing. We all know that Sith deal in absolutes, and that's not right. Like he's sort of like, you know what, not really my thing. I don't really want to be in an authority position. I don't really want to fight, but if it comes down to it, I will. It's fine. And that sort of plan has worked pretty well up until this point. So for those who forgot, for those who are deeply vested in this, Rye's been having to collect all of these, basically like a baker's dozen of I don't know, SanDisk flash drives that his evil dad / not dad father backed himself up onto, and you got to catch them all. So if father gets all of them, he'll be at full power again, whatever. And Rye's been going around trying to find them and destroy them.
So, but what if Rye just takes one? Doesn't that prevent father from like completing himself, their self?
Right. So, I mean, maybe the hard drive backing up, analogy starts to fail a little, but with each one that father gets, he becomes more powerful. So it's not like you can't do anything until you have the full set.
Gotcha.
Which I guess now it's in Dragon Ball territory, right? Because like you can't do anything without all of them, right? So basically, so for those needing, an analogy, it's not like Dragon Ball. Like the more you have, the more powerful you are. But once you get all of them, that's like point of no return levels of power.
I see.
So Rye's been going around and blowing him up and destroying him, and that's been working out in mixed results. This issue gets a little bit iffy because the source in which these new ones have been placed might make it a little difficult because they're in a, minor spoilers, this one's been embedded in a person. So
I mean, for a book that I think it actually came out last week, I should just correct you from earlier. I think it came out on the 11th. So if you haven't read Rye number 9 yet, don't go too far to the spoilers, Nick.
Right, yeah, and that's sort of the hook. If you're saying, Nick, you just revealed the whole thing, no, like that's the hook. It's way more complicated and trickier than that. But I think that's a good I think Dan Abnett put it in a really kind of tricky to navigate place. So I liked that. I'll also say I briefly read BPRD, Hellboy and the BPRD 1955. This is made up of the one-shot story Secret Nature, which featured Sean Martinsborough on pencils, and the miniseries Occult Intelligence with art by Brian Chirilla, and Burning Season, which is another one-shot by Paolo and Joe Rivera on art. Again, as per usual with this series, Mike Mignola and Chris Roberson of iZombie fame. Just Roberson. Mignola, to my knowledge, was not involved in iZombie. Did all of the writing. I was definitely most excited about Burning Season. I thought Paolo and Joe Rivera did an absolutely stellar job when they did the miniseries Hellboy and the BPRD in 1953, Beyond the Fences, which was like Hellboy meets Norman Rockwell Suburbia. I thought that was an absolutely really great series. This one begins with a caption that informs the reader that the story is taking place in Florida, which, I mean, I get that this is a horror book, but you don't need to show your hand right out of the gate. Like, this is in Florida. All right, I'm done. Like, that's it. Thanks for playing. I'm done with this. Scary. I'm done with this story.
Wait, were they hunting like the cryptid known as Florida Man, or is there something else going on here?
It is a case of like a good X-Files cold open. You have a couple, they get lost, I assume, in northern Florida. Car pulls off by the side of the road. Woman's leaning on the side of the car with the map. Guy goes out into the woods, goes out into the deep woods to go take a piss. And I gotta say, like, Mike Mignola really flips the script here, because normally it's the guy who's like, I'm gonna go take a deep woods piss. He's the guy who ends up dying, right? Like, so I want to thank Mike Mignola for advocating for deep woods pissers and flipping the script, because it's the woman who's hanging out by the car with the map who spontaneously combusts.
Right, we needed something from the deep woods pisser to return to that was tragic.
Right, and so again, like, it's got everything that's absolutely scary. It's got Florida, it's got nature, it's got fears of relieving oneself in places that don't have actual plumbing. And then just when you think it can't get even more worse, there's spontaneous combustion, followed by the fact that all of this is happening right next door to what appears to be a haunted, abandoned theme park full of very scary, like 1950s, super shitty, like large-scale dinosaur sculptures that may or may not be haunted. And if you've ever gone on YouTube and looked at like abandoned theme park videos where people go in with like a GoPro at like 2 a.m. and you're like, someone is going to die, like, Mike Mignola has somehow gotten through the tinfoil hat and is actively tapping into all of my fears now.
Oh, good.
So you're welcome, Mike. Also, where's my check?
You've admitted all of this to the listeners. Now they know how to get to you. You fool. It's on the record. You can't take it back.
Anyway, so, I just, what an amazing way to tap into so many things I'm scared of in 22 pages. Other than that, I'll just briefly say I started Resident Alien. It's the new, it's not a new series, but it's going to be a show for Sci-Fi with Alan Tudyk. Alien crashes on Earth, assumes the role of a backwoods doctor, and it's actually kind of small-timey and quaint, but I haven't read much of that. I'll have more feedback later. So
Gotcha. Well, I just want to say that, the Discord is blown up with Deep Woods Pissers. Everyone really loves it. I can tell. No one's mad about it.
Shocked.
No one's done with it.
We've seen this happen so many times, right? I'm going to stay by the car. You go into the woods. I have to go to the bathroom. And then they always punish the person who needs to go to the bathroom.
Right.
Some of us have overactive bladders, and we shouldn't be killed by cryptozoological creatures all of the time just because we have to go to the bathroom a lot. It's not
Right.
It's not fair. Like, there should be a commercial on TV that is promoting some drug for those of us who, you know, taking a big trip, worried about Bigfoot dismembering you, you know, take such and such.
Yeah. Well, we've already spent too much time on this, so I'm just going to move right on. Kate, how are you? How have your comics been? What have you been reading?
I'm pretty good. Comics have been also pretty good. I have most recently read Skyward Volume 1. This was by Joe Henderson with art by Lee Garber and colorist. The colorist was Antonia Fabella. I've read this because I've been trying to do this Pop Sugar reading challenge, which is like 60 something books that you're supposed to read in a year. And I'm down to the last like 9. And of course, you know, I'm not sure that I can finish it. So I'm like, okay, comics count now. What can I read for this? There's something upside down on the cover challenge. And it was this. So
cheater. I see. I mean,
yeah.
Sorry. Good pick.
Look, it was a lot of books to try to read in 12 months. So here I am.
Yeah, I agree. 60 books in a year is a lot. I mean, prose books is one thing. Like, you have to incorporate something shorter, right? Do novellas count? Do children's books count? Like, come on.
Right. So, but I did end up really liking this book, and I think I'm going to continue with the series. So the premise is that one day the Earth's gravity just flips off. People and objects float out into space and get stuck in the orbit around the Earth. It kind of looks like they zoom out from Earth, and it kind of looks like Earth has a ring around it, but then it's like buses and people and stuff, mail, like so anyway, the story picks up 20 years later, following a girl named Willa, whose mom died during that flip off of gravity, and whose dad hasn't left the apartment in almost that whole time. Willa's a really great character. I like her. She's great. She's enthusiastic. She basically parkours from one building to the other as a courier, but like there's stuff hanging off buildings so that people can like grab onto them if they start floating away.
Oh yeah.
And but there's still that problem of like capitalism is a thing. So the antagonist of this book is a man who got very rich by developing magnetized products that let the elite pretend like gravity is still working. So it's like their shoes will magnetize to the sidewalks and such.
Right.
And this guy is determined
real late
to
stage capitalism.
Yeah. This guy is determined to keep gravity turned off, to keep the money rolling in. But Willa wants to find a way to turn gravity back on, restore things to normal, you know, have her dad leave the apartment. And turns out that her dad might know what happened and why gravity flipped off and why her mom ended up dying. And of course, this all goes much deeper than you would think from this nice, like, kind of fun book about parkouring off of buildings. There are 2 more volumes on Hoopla, so I think that this is a series that I'm probably going to finish. I think that that's the rest of the series. Don't quote me on that, but...
Yeah, it looks like it. According to the Amazon description, it says like Skyward Volume 3 collects the conclusion of the hit series.
Yeah, so it was a good, quick read. I really liked the art, diverse cast of characters. It's pretty much up my alley. So I'm glad that I accepted that my Pop Sugar reading challenge could be comics.
Was this 2012? Wasn't there a movie where Earth's polarity got like instantaneously reversed and like, or inverted, and a whole bunch of bad shit started happening?
Yeah, I feel like I know what you're talking about, and there's like a giant elevator that sends you through the center of the planet. I don't know. Somebody, Discord, I want you guys to figure that out for us. All right, so let's move on. I just because I want to bring up some comics that I read because I'm excited about them. Specifically, I started rereading Die by Kieran Gillen and Stephanie Hans because I can't keep track of the characters in this book for some reason. I don't know what it is, but like everybody's sad and everybody's in a particular like blend of sad, and I can't keep them apart. And a lot of things happen plot wise that I just couldn't remember. And after the whole like delay in publishing because of COVID and all this other stuff, I kind of was just like, I don't know what's happening. I tried to read like issue 13 or 14 or something, and I just could not keep it straight. So I decided to start from the beginning. Made some realizations about characters that I missed apparently the first time I started reading it. And it's still good. It's still sad. Makes me just want to play tabletop RPGs and not make my friends sad. Like I want to do the exact opposite of what's happening in Die, but still have that level of character involvement. So I don't know if it's possible, but I've been digging the reread. Otherwise, I did read My Hero Academia 290 and 291, and while I feel like I don't bring up a lot of the weekly Shonen Jump books that I read like weekly, with the exception of One Piece, and we'll get there. I want to talk about these last two chapters because My Hero Academia for me for the past maybe like 30-ish chapters since this whole, for those of you who are caught up, there's a huge fight that's going on. There's been a huge fight that's going on, and it's characters jumping back and forth to the point in some places where you have no idea what's going on. And I think that's been like a huge criticism of the series is that the fights are very complicated and the paneling is very weird. And I still really love the series because I know that they were going to get to a point where something was going to be delivered, but it just felt like everything was amping up in one direction in a way that I wasn't really a fan of, but I was going to keep reading. And then there was a bombshell of a drop that happened in 290 that totally broke my brain and kind of made me rethink a lot of the last 150 chapters of the series, which is amazing, right? This is called really good storytelling. And even though apparently people on the internet predicted the big twist that happened, I'm not a fan.
I was just trying to have your back immediately.
Yeah, no,
like if you don't want it, message received.
All I'm saying is that like a lot of people apparently predicted this twist in the story, and I didn't see it coming because I'm not the type of person that like tries to overly predict things, and I know I've probably done it on the show a zillion times, which makes me a hypocrite, but I really, like, as I was reading this series, like there's so many complicated
things. Gonna roll in a super cut right here
of
like a 5-minute montage.
yeah So all I'm saying is I didn't see this coming. I really like the twist that they made. It makes a lot of sense, and there is nothing wrong with the twist that doesn't defy your expectations, right? I think that throwing in something that maybe people could have seen a million like years or coming from a million miles away is totally fine if it works in the story and enriches it. You're not disappointing your fans by making all the things that click together click. So I'm very happy with what happened. 291 is an even further pushing of that holy shit moment that happens at the end of 290. So like if you're someone that's catching up on the trades or you only read the collected editions of the series, man, you have something coming in a couple volumes that is really going to floor you. And I promise that it is worth it to push through some of the rougher fighting chapters just to get to that point. So Kohei Horikoshi has totally floored me, and I'm back super invested in this series. And a lot of the people that I've talked to online about this feel the exact same way. We've kind of just been pushing through, hoping for something to happen that would be really interesting, and it finally happened, and we're all back on board. Everyone in the Discord are freaking out about something. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But anyways, the last thing I do want to do before we move into comic picks is got to give my One Piece update. So Xander, could you roll the clip?
Nice.
I'm on 975. Again, 5 chapters a week. I'm taking my sweet time. It's like eating the last bit of like a 24-ounce steak that was just the best. And while you're very full, you're also enjoying the flavor. And Jeff in the Discord is on 973. We are going to hit chapter 1000 when 1000 comes out. Everyone, I'm so excited. And then after that, we're going to read another big manga series, or probably not a big manga series, but something that a whole group of people can read that's digestible, like Demon Slayer or Haikyuu or something like that. We'll see. But anyways, One Piece is amazing. It's still fantastic. Gotta love the big Wano arc that's going on. And yeah, so let's move on. Let's talk about comic books that are coming out this upcoming week. Comics are dropping on November 18, 2020. What are you both excited for this week? Let's start with you, Kate.
I'm excited for Jim Henson's Storyteller Ghosts.
Ooh.
The anthology is credited to Mike Laszlo and Jennifer Ratowski, but every issue is a different story with a different creative team. So these books are basically they're themed books where you might recognize the like characters in them. You might have heard of them, but the way that they're interpreted and written about are completely unique and original. I've read Jim Henson's Storyteller Witches recently, and then I've been slowly working my way through the Fairies book. And these stories are whimsical and a little bit dark. And they're like a reinterpretation of an old fairy tale for the most part. But I have to wonder if, because there are, or I know of fewer fairy tales that involve ghosts in comparison to witches and fairies. So I'm wondering if this particular volume is going to be a little bit more like totally unique stories. But it turns out that the Storyteller was a TV show a couple of decades ago where the character of the Storyteller was played by John Hurt, and he would tell stories to a talking dog while sitting in front of a fireplace.
That's Snowpiercer.
Oh, no. The stories in these comics are kind of introduced by that same character combo. So the Storyteller will be like, I heard of this story that I'm about to tell you, and then the dog will say something like question it, and the Storyteller will be like, just you wait. And so it's very
take
quaint.
You back to the Humane Society. It will happen if you keep that attitude.
Yeah. So the Storyteller himself is like, it's a very like quaint, cute, whimsical setting, but then you go into these stories that are kind of dark.
Oh yeah, all the Jim Henson Storyteller stuff I've read is like grim fairy tale style. Like, I mean, it's probably not as brutal, but it's still pretty dark for a kid's story. Kind of like that. What is it? The Legend of the Crystal Kingdom skull with the Muppets. I can't remember what it's called.
Like Dark Crystal, maybe?
The
Dark
Indiana
Crystal.
Jones Muppet crossover.
Dark Crystal. Thank you. That show is pretty dark. Those Skeksis things scare the living shit out of me. So like, Jim Henson is capable of some dark stuff.
Yeah, I might need to track down this show, but I'm definitely going to be reading like all of these books, and there's quite a few of them on Hoopla already.
Nice. Nick, what about you? What have you been reading? Or what are you excited for? Jeez, oh Pete's.
There were definitely a couple contenders here. There was a new AVP book, but I wasn't really that excited about the creative team on it. And like, AVP is fine, but in the Nick White hierarchy of xenomorphs, it's definitely Aliens, then AVP, because I guess Predator is okay, right? And then beneath that is Predator all by itself, because who cares? Predators are jerks. Yeah. So they did manage to, get Adrian Brody off of Earth, which I guess made things slightly more palatable, but beyond that, they're jerks. So I opted for this week instead to go with Sea of Sorrows #1. This is from IDW. It's by the creative team of Rich Dudek writing and Alex Cormack on art. And apparently this creative team did a book last year called Road of Bones. And you might be shocked to know that with a title like Road of Bones, it's not like a slice of life title about like some quirky cat cafe owner who just got out of a long-term 2-year relationship and she just wants to focus on her cats now. Okay. It's not okay. Some of us thought it was going to be about that, but it wasn't about that. It was about Soviet gulags in the 1950s, and trying to escape, which, I mean, I feel like that's a redundant statement. I don't think anyone really wanted to be there. That said, I think that's a good framing device for Sea of Sorrows, because clearly this team is interested in sort of honing in on certain parts of history that maybe, at least from a narrative perspective, we're not seeing a lot of stories out of. And maybe that's just like me from an American-centric perspective saying, well, if it didn't happen in these great United States, then, why do I need to learn about the rest of the world? I guess this is going to get real dark now. So this story, Sea of Sorrows, it's set at the tail end of the 1920s, which is really interesting for me because you think of the 1920s and it's basically flagpole sitting, goldfish eating, live goldfish eating, flappers, jazz, people doing crazy things, and a lot of drugs. But this actually has to do with how you have this group of treasure seekers post World War I. They're going out into the North Atlantic to try to get their hands on to sort of scavenge some of the wreckage from World War I, including this German U-boat that apparently has a bunch of gold on it. The Germans are always leaving gold in places during wars, right. I guess, apparently. I guess, if you wanted a MacGuffin, it would just be Germans and gold. So they're going to go down, and the art looks amazing, and it's all of those like deep sea diver suits that look like something like the Big Daddies wear in BioShock. And again, basically a book with everything I'm terrified of. It's claustrophobia and sharks and a severe lack of having one's own personal space and large open bodies of water and mermaids that aren't at all interested in being a part of your world, quote unquote. I guess that's what they said in that Disney movie. And sharks again. I just want to reemphasize sharks.
Yeah.
So yeah, it looks terrifying. Again, I feel like this team is kind of honed in on, a little niche of history that you don't really see, certainly in terms of comics. I haven't really seen like a 1920s post World War I, narrative. So I'm interested in it from that perspective. Yes, it does seem to have a very obligatory cheesecake mermaid cover that has several very deliberately placed bubbles. I'll leave it at that. I think that probably spells it all out. And, that's like, okay, maybe we didn't need to do that. But aside from that, I'm interested.
Okay. Well, I just want to say that I'm very mad at you, Nick. Because I distinctly remember you sending me a message of a list of books that I was not allowed to pick as my pick for this episode.
That's right.
And you didn't pick any of those books that were on that list, I think.
I did pick that book. I picked Sea of Sorrows.
Okay, well, I'm just saying, I'm very mad at you. So I picked a book that I am excited about, but it wasn't my necessarily first pick. And now I've already got my notes here. So I'm just going to say, I really wanted to pick the Barbalian book that's coming out, but I couldn't because Nick had called dibs on it. Just saying. I had dibs on like 4 books, to be fair, which was unreasonable. And I had to remove Bang Volume 1 because apparently my source had the date wrong. So yeah.
Barbalian is just going to I think it's going to make me so sad. Like, I feel like that book is going to be really sad.
Have you read Captain or Colonel Weird? Because, yes.
Have you read all of the rest of Black Hammer?
Have you read Black Hammer? Anyway.
Have you read Jeff Lemire's collected works?
So I didn't pick Barbalian, the new Barbalian book that's coming out, which is part of the Black Hammer verse for folks out there who are... still haven't had a chance to catch up. But I am going to talk about the book that I picked, which is 7 to Eternity, number 14. This is by Rick Remender with art by Jerome Opeña. I'm probably saying his name wrong. I feel bad. With colors by Matt Hollingsworth. And I picked this book mostly because I'm surprised that another issue came out, because I just assumed that the book was over. Honestly.
I remember you were not totally sold on this book out of the gate.
Well, I wasn't, and I kept reading it because I can't get away from Opeña's art. It's so good.
Interesting.
And so I'm like, all right, let's just keep reading it. And I genuinely thought the book was over because it's been quite a while since there was any news on it, and it's probably because I don't follow like the solicits as closely as I should, and I don't follow these creators online because I've got a whole thing about Rick Remender's books. But beyond that,
I don't read them.
But anyway, so there's a whole new arc. It sounds like this is going to be the wrap-up arc to the series, which is good. I'm glad that we're actually going to get something that closes things out. However, I am extremely disappointed in the fact that a lot of really cool shit has happened in this book, and we're not going to get any more lore, any more world building, any more chance to expand upon a lot of the stuff that I think Remender built into this series. So it's unfortunate, but you know what? I'm glad that we're at least getting something to end it rather than just it being done with issue number 13. So I'm probably gonna have to reread this whole series just like Die. A lot of moving parts, lots of characters, lots of motivations, all of which seems to they either all are all going to coincide in this last arc, or we're just gonna focus on the one story bit because characters broke up, and like just like D&D, you should never split the party, but they did. So we're gonna see how this plays out. I don't know. If you guys haven't read this book, it's beautiful. Like, it's probably some of the coolest fantasy art you can see outside of something like Stephanie Hans or there's a couple other artists out there that are doing great fantasy work. But so anyways, 7 to Eternity, number 14 is my pick. And I guess we're going to take a quick break. And when we do, when we come back, I guess, we're going to talk about this comic book time machine thing. We did another episode about this before. We're going to do one again. And I had to scramble this week. Actually, not really. There's a lot of books that came out in October. But anyways, we'll talk about that when we come back from our break. our show this week, we are revisiting a topic that we did a little bit earlier this year that I thought was a lot of fun, comic book time machine. Let's find a comic that was released the month and year you were born and discuss. No context, no backup stories, whatever you may find, just pick it up and read it. So Kate, myself, and Nick, we all grabbed the comic that came out in the year and the month that we were born. It's probably going to be roughly around the same time period, but nonetheless, we're going to talk about these. So just really quick, let's give some high-level just understanding as to what we're going to be talking about today. So Kate, what was the book that you picked? I picked, because there was a bunch that came out, and I guess maybe give people the month and the year that you were born, if that's okay.
Yeah, I was born in August 1988, and I picked John Constantine, Hellblazer number 8.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot. I got a lot of questions. Nick, what about you? What did you pick?
So I'm super old, and so I picked Iron Man 205, which came out in April of '86.
Okay.
I was half debating Droids number 1, but apparently when Dark Horse compiled their Droids omnibus, they decided they weren't going to include this run. So yeah. And then I was also looking at a Swamp Thing issue, but then Kate was doing Constantine, and I was like, someone's already kind of doing that Vertigo, gotcha. Swamp Thing, Constantine vibe. So I'm just there was some method to the madness.
Understandable. So I was born in October of '88, and so I had actually a lot of stuff to pick from, because if you look through the archives of the internet and you find all the comics that came out in October of 1988, you'll find that there's a very big X-Men event that started that month. I decided not to pick that X-Men event.
Wow.
I'm saving it for a very special occasion. We'll find it. But one day I'll get to that. But I did pick Black Panther, number 4 of 4 that came out. So this is the last issue in a 4-issue miniseries, which is great because it gives you the entire story all at once. So yeah, I guess let's kind of get into this. I'm curious to know, I've been on an episode of this already, so I kind of have done this before, and we all know that, my favorite thing to say is just roll with the punches of comics. So I'm curious to know, Nick and Kate, maybe let's start with you, Kate. Like, what was it like just kind of diving in headfirst to a book that you've never read before? And I don't know what your history is with John Constantine, so I'm curious to know what you thought.
Yeah, so it turns out that I had actually tried reading the volume that this issue was in a couple of years ago, but it didn't work for me, and I stopped reading it before I even started issue 2.
Wow, so you hate John Constantine is what I'm hearing.
Well, no, I was actually excited one of the reasons I chose this book is I had forgotten that I had tried reading it before, first of all. And I like John Constantine as a character when I've seen him in other things, like the show adaptation, the movie he was in. He was probably my favorite part of Sandman Volume 1. So I was like, yeah, this book that's his, dedicated to him, it's his book. It's got to be something that I'm going to like, right?
It's very British. It's so unapologetically British.
Interesting.
It's not even that.
I've never read this.
It was very, very dark.
Okay. Yes, that
I don't
too.
mean the art.
Well, okay. So yeah, could you tell us a little bit about this book then? I mean, and what it was about even?
Yeah. So I, because I had tried reading it before, and because I wanted to read more about John Constantine, and I had a reason to make it to issue 8, I did end up reading what came before it in the volume, which this was collected into volume 1 original sin. So it really is the very beginning of John Constantine, standalone story, at least. So I'm actually really glad that I did power through before issue 8, because all of the rest of the issues in this volume were they could have been standalone stories. There was common subplots, but for the most part, they focused on one thing, except for issue 8. Issue 8 really felt like filler. Sorry, Constantine. So for some context, John has a lot of guilt going into this issue. He had recently rescued his niece from a cultist, but he had found the bodies of 3 other young girls in the same house. So his niece was fine, but the other ladies were not fine. And he starts dating a woman named Zed, who is also somehow wrapped up with these same people, same cultists, and she gets kidnapped by them. And then John has also been plagued by the ghosts of friends that he has not been able to save in like the previous years, I assume. So issue 8 opens with John getting tortured in prison for doing something to a little girl. And this goes on for a number of pages until he wakes up in a hospital in a full body cast. And this was some kind of fever dream. The prison stuff was not real, even though it went on for like a quarter of the issue. And he's remembering that he had jumped off of a train to get away from the ghosts of his friends that are plaguing him. And he has like broken his whole body now. And he's like, there's somebody else in the room with me. I can feel it, but I'm not going to open my eyes for some reason. So there's at least a whole spread of him being felt up by a very gross looking tongue all over his face. And he finally opens his eyes, and it's a demon who wants John to work with him to take down these same cultists. And after settling some terms, John is like, okay, yeah, fine, we can do this, but I obviously can't like physically move right now to help you at the moment. So the demon's like, that's fine. Hell has some healing powers. I just have to figure out how to make them heal you. So we just drips have to blaze demon blood.
We have to hell blaze it. Right?
Yeah.
Is that what he said?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
So he drips demon blood into John's IV, which looks very painful and awful. And throughout this whole issue, we're getting occasional panels of his girlfriend, Zed, being brainwashed by this cult that kidnapped her. And there's an implication that she's pregnant. And they're also calling her Mary now for some reason.
I'm sure that doesn't have some sort of bigger implication in later stories.
Right. So, yeah, it was just like, it was a head scratch of an episode, really. Like, a lot happened. And I want to finish the volume to see, like, how it wraps up and how all these, like, otherwise episodic issues all tie together. Because there's really felt like some kind of, like, break toward a big wrap up, like maybe the following issues in this volume must be some kind of like big climax that really do build on one another, as opposed to the previous 7 issues that were just kind of separate. But man, this was a lot. And like I was excited to read a book that was released around the time that I was born, partially because I haven't read a whole lot that was released even before 2000, but also because I'm interested to know how, like, what comics were like when I was born, like when my life started, what were comics doing? Unfortunately, it was this.
Yeah, exactly. I was gonna say.
Oh man.
Well, I want to put a pin in that and come back to that, because that's an interesting point that I want to kind of get back to. But I want to hear what Nick's book was all about.
Yeah, so Iron Man 205, I picked it largely because I liked the creative team. You got Denny O'Neil, famous DC editor and writer, who wrote this, and you got Mark Bright on pencils, who would later come to be known as MD Bright, and he drew Christopher Priest's absolutely fantastic Quantum and Woody run for Valiant in the 90s. And this was also when Jim Shooter was in charge of Marvel, for better or for worse, right? Thankfully, this issue appears to have been the beginning of a new arc or something like that. Even though like all of the editor's notes are like super passive aggressive, like they're not even like they're not even like, don't forget in issue 4 Tony Stark drank way too much whiskey. They're like, this references issue 4, but you already knew that. It's like, whoa, and it continues. Like, there's another one where it's like, yeah, we all remember when this happened in issue 201, so I don't need to say anything else on this topic. I'm like, what? It's really mean. Like, they're really mean editor's notes. Okay.
I'm gonna put this all on Jim Shooter. This is all Jim Shooter's
I think
fault.
it was Jim. So the cover has Iron Man and MODOK, and I know next to nothing about MODOK? I don't even. Is it a machine, a man?
Machine only designed, only killing. I don't actually remember what it stands for. It's something like that. Machine designed only for killing, I think. I don't know. Somebody in the chat, please let me know. Folks on Discord, you're the best. Thank you.
So this was back when people still put text on covers, which that's not a knock. Like I'm okay with that, but obviously the industry has trended somewhat away from that. And it says MODOK is dead and he's still giving Iron Man a hard time. And then of course the book begins and like Iron Man is flying around in space. He sees that like a government satellite is falling into the atmosphere, which he says, quote, "This means that an important government communications link will be kaput." And so Tony Stark, ever the defender of the modern surveillance state, years before it was in vogue, goes and self-corrects the satellite, and says, quote, "I've heard that a lot of these babies go astray at a cost of millions," emphasis on millions, to government and industry, he says. So like full credit to Denny O'Neil. Like Tony Stark is like very much like in the pockets of the government, and very much he's not like, oh no, this is gonna by my calculations this satellite will hit Toronto and 250,000 people will die. He's like, this satellite, it's gonna cost a lot of money for the government. It's can't have that happen. So I mean, I love that. I don't know.
Iron Man from the 80s is like a completely different picture of the character than I think we know, and that's because of the Marvel movies have changed the depiction of what we think of Iron Man. Like, dude was the hardest capitalist you could ever think of, and it wasn't until Jon Favreau was just like, what if he's already so rich that he can be a good person?
I mean, he's got a one-track mind, and I gotta hand it to Denny O'Neil.
Yeah,
like, I think he knew what he was doing.
Yeah, he was. Yeah,
and so this kind of inspires him. He's got like a new set of armor here, which has like a Daredevil black and red color palette going on, and it's got shoulder pads, so like you can kind of date when this came out. But so he's kind of inspired by this whole thing. And he's like, hey, maybe space is the new frontier, and I need to turn over a new leaf and not worry about fighting all of these bad guys, and maybe stop drinking as much. And now he's having to deal with these evil guys from this organization called AIM, which was kind of a weird choice for Denny O'Neil. Like, obviously, this was before AOL Instant Messenger sort of took over that acronym, but like. The American Indian movement was at the time, and still is, like a very large, important organization with that acronym. And like, I'm not saying if someone else took an acronym that you can't use it too, but it was very distracting to see them keep referring to themselves as AIM. Right. And I'm like, you are not representing either AIM that I know.
Right. Like the old classic of WWF. Being like the World Wildlife Foundation, and then the WWF had to change to WWE, and now whenever I see World Wildlife Foundation with the panda and it says WWF, all I can think of is that Stone Cold Steve Austin?
All I can think of is a panda suplexing someone into a collapsible table. Yeah, exactly. So it was kind of an interesting choice there on Denny's choice, especially because the organization is Advanced Idea Mechanics, which is like, come on, you can do better than that. And so this isn't the debut of that team, that organization, right? Oh, I don't know. Okay. It's a pair of brothers. One of them keeps calling the other one the Scientist Supreme.
Sure. They very much have like a cult like thing. I mean,
this is the ones I sent you where all of their henchmen have giant conical yellow helmets that look like
I think longtime readers of Marvel comics are very familiar with this team. So this being new, it is kind of a strange organization because it's like a mix of a cult and advanced science and stuff. So it's bizarre.
Yeah, and so like they're brothers. They hate each other. They're like, one of us is going to be smart enough to deal with Iron Man, and so they try to take control of MODOK, which is, I guess, supposed to be dead at this point, and the editor is like, we all know that MODOK was killed by the Serpent Society in Captain America 313. And if you don't know that,
Sure.
what are you even doing with your life? And I wish I was making that up. The first part literally was an editor's note. I mean, they didn't get that direct, but it was like, oh my goodness. So they get in a big fight, and I love it because Tony Stark, before the fight, he's like, you know, I want to do space. And I'm like, well, you're rich. You can do whatever you want. And Tony's like, yeah, I just need to get some funding from some well-respected individuals in the community. I'm like, what?
Sure.
Like, are you poor at this point? What?
Well, he's rich, but he's not extra
He's rich,
you know?
but he doesn't want to spend his money, right?
Right.
And so
That's how
literally
you
it
stay
shows
rich.
him putting on the Iron Man armor and going to conventions at like and going to like conference rooms at like Marriott hotels and putting on PowerPoint presentations.
Great.
He like sails into the room, the conference room, and he like puts on a presentation about how he wants their money.
Yeah.
I love this book so fucking much. There is so much absolutely bonkers shit going on. And he's hanging around with James Rhodes, who apparently has decided that the nickname for Iron Man is Shellhead, which I've never heard that nickname for Iron Man, but apparently it's happening.
Yeah.
Is that a thing?
I think that's a thing.
This book also can't seem to decide if it's going to do, and you see this as well with Batman, like, do you see the eyes behind the mask or not? And this book seems to go back and forth on, like, are we going to show the eyes behind the mask or not? And you shouldn't have to make that decision because it's fucking creepy, and stop it. And I don't want to see it.
It's terrifying when you can see Tony's eyes behind the mask, because in order to show them well, you can't like show a squinty-eyed person. You have to show the eyes like wide, and it looks like he's terrified behind the mask constantly.
Oh man. Anyway, so like that is the very basic overview. It gets wild. There's some woman in it who I guess Michael, I had to go on the Marvel Wikia this week, and that's like, how dare you make me have to go on the Marvel Wikia? How dare you? The sheer gall. I had to look up this woman who becomes like War Machine 2.0, and so I was reading that, and it's like, oh, she also becomes Iron Woman, and I'm like, well, I guess I gotta read this too. Anyway, it was a wild fucking issue. It felt like I was reading Elon Musk's life 30 years before it happened.
Right. Well, okay. I have so many questions, but I do want to get to my book before I round back to ask kind of a bigger question about all these. I read Black Panther from 1988, number 404. Like I said, this is by Peter B. Gillis, art by Dennis Cohen. I couldn't find any other credits. I'm sure there are other people. I'm sure that I could have looked in the book and do that, but I didn't because I'm lazy. But let me actually do that right now because I think it's in here. Inks by Sam De La Rosa, letters by Rick Parker, colors by, quote, Max Scheel. Mark Grunwald did the editing, and Tom DeFalco was the editor-in-chief at the time. But this book is really interesting because it's the end of a 4-issue miniseries. So I'm pretty sure that I'm missing a lot of context, but what I gathered is that this story is about Black Panther still trying to prove himself in becoming the king of Wakanda. He has, his very high intellect. He's created a lot of technological things that benefit him. But at the same time, he's still trying to prove himself while there is this ongoing uprising in a nearby country called Anzania. And it looks like somebody was trying to frame Black Panther as being the person who was leading this, quote, communist-led uprising in this other country, when it was actually just the natives who lived in this country fighting or pushing back against the imperialist white folks who I don't know where they were from, but the imperialist, like, basically rulers of this country. And so Black Panther was framed for that. It turns out that it was a combination of his Panther god trying to instill power within the people of Africa, and as well as this third-party secret agent like hitman that kind of showed up and was paid a bunch of money to help spurn this uprising. So the issue follows Black Panther as he goes to seek out his final task in becoming the true king of Wakanda, and he has to go fight this panther spirit. Black Panther knows, I should say, T'Challa knows that this spirit created this fake version of him that caused this uprising, and he tells the deity, why would I start a fight that I knew I couldn't win? These people are only just trying to rebel and create war and strife in their country, and it's a losing battle, and there's better ways that you can do it. Through peaceful protest and things like that, and for a movie or book that came out in 1988, like this is a really powerful message, and it's very on the nose, talking about like African imperialism within Africa, and as well as T'Challa's just struggle in making sure that he is this rightful king who will do the right thing for all of his people, and he will sacrifice himself before he sacrifices his country and the people of his country. There's a great line in this that's like, Wakanda's body is my body. So by the end, he ends up losing this fight with this panther spirit, the panther spirit who is his god, but he loses the physical fight, but he wins the, I guess, mental fight by explaining that he will again put himself before his country, to make sure that no one is harmed and to ensure that the country survives, and the kingdom survives. I thought that was a really powerful thing. And again, the final like bit with the rebellion was that like the people who were running this country of Anzania, which are like all these white guys, meet with the chief of this native group that live in the country, and they come to the conclusion that in order for the country Anzania to succeed, both people, black and white, have to come together to determine what the future of the country is going to look like. And they're like, I'm almost quoting things verbatim about how that issue ends, because they're very upfront with like, it's all about peace and unity. They're like, no, the white folks who live here and the black folks who lived here have to work together in order for this country to survive and do well and prosper. And I thought it was like a really powerful issue while also establishing a ton of Black Panther lore. So yeah, this is a great issue. I feel like I need to go back and reread all of these. And if you were one of those folks who got all of those Black Panther comics for free off of Comixology, like this is a fantastic read. I think I'm going to, like I said, go back and reread the whole miniseries because it's really, really good. But yeah, so mine is very politically motivated. It's a very, very, very serious book. There's some cool side characters.
Politics didn't show up in comics until
the 80s. Definitely didn't really have a lot of political stuff going on. It's not like there was any kind of wild strife here in America or anything, right, or in Russia or in Europe. I know it was really peaceful back then, but this is a really good political book. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, it's really good. It's really good. So I'm curious to know, Nick and Kate, I know Kate in specific, you said you hadn't read a lot of books that came out before the year 2000. So I'm curious to know what you thought of this book. And Nick, you feel free to chime in as well. Like picking up a book that is far, far, behind in terms of like, it comes from a totally different time and a different culture in a lot of ways, in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, I was really interested to hear. Obviously, Kate said she read the whole arc, so I think she can provide this insight. I read Constantine, a while ago, and I was pretty surprised. It's pretty unapologetically a real time capsule. Like, it's not a book that is sort of timeless and sort of, it's difficult to read between the lines. It's very much a book addressing Margaret Thatcher, the Margaret Thatcher era,
right,
in England, and
right,
at least from the writer's perspective,
in England,
yeah, he's I think Jamie Delano's the writer. He's not real keen on what's going on at the time, and I think that's to put it mildly. And so when I was reading it, not only was there a lot of British slang and references to things that I definitely had to look up, but it was so much, of a counterculture, peek behind the curtain at like what British politics and what British life was like in the 1980s, that there was something of a barrier to entry, not only for me not being British, but also for me, not really growing up at that point. So I was curious, did you have the same issues, or is some of this just the fact that I was reading this a while ago and wasn't maybe being as careful of a reader as I should have been.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reasonably. I've watched enough BBC stuff, I guess.
Yeah.
that I'm familiar enough with like the time period in the UK that wasn't a barrier for me. I mean, it was definitely noticeable. There was Margaret Thatcher commentary. There was commentary about like who British people were kind of racist against at the time. There was some homophobia, which I'm not sure if Jamie Delano's writing implied that the character was homophobic or if he was homophobic. I don't know. It was
Constantine.
Yeah, I mean
that is crazy.
Well, okay, so there was a character. There's some commentary that I assume was from the point of view of Constantine. Maybe the narrator had been different for a couple of pages and I didn't notice.
Sure.
And then you find out that one of Constantine's friends is gay and has AIDS. So I don't know if maybe this was like the writer was trying to show that Constantine is like growing as a person, because of finding out that people that are close to him are maybe not, they're not who he thought that they were or something. I don't know. But
so the other reason I like yelled about that for a second is because Constantine now is like very canonically bisexual.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to hear that, because I don't know. I for some reason just had it in my head that was other writers bringing up things that were maybe implied in older like comics. So that's crazy to hear that. But again, maybe to your point, maybe he's growing, maybe he's learning more about himself as the story goes on.
I mean, I also could have misread it, but the idea that John is a dynamic character is kind of emphasized in this book. Like he's clearly being plagued by his past mistakes, like people that he couldn't save, and he's trying to he kind of throws himself into danger, even though I'm pretty sure that he's mortal. I'm not really sure if he's entirely human.
No one knows.
I think doesn't the demon blood kind of I think literally the demon blood IV sort of complicates that issue.
Okay.
If I remember right, it's been a while, to quote. Is that Stained? It's been a while. Yeah, that's Stained.
Yeah,
sorry everyone.
Listen, if we're gonna read references, just move on.
Didn't mean to reference Stained, not intentionally.
Go ahead, Kate. Go ahead.
But even before the demon blood IV, John really does throw himself into danger to save other people. Although he does like have a breaking point where he's like, no, this is too dangerous. I might not survive this if I don't leave. So he is like, he's dynamic, but also not like totally insane.
Canonically a coward.
I feel like most Constantine stories stem from Constantine not reading the terms and conditions, right?
Yeah.
And it's somebody rolling in from 2 arcs back and being like, hey, remember when we agreed to X, Y, and Z, and now you have to work for me? And he's like, damn it. And that's like, I have to stop making deals with demons.
Yeah,
why am I always
really
making deals with demons?
He really does. Like
he really does.
In more than one situation in this book, not necessarily with the demon specifically, but he keeps saying like, I owe someone a favor or someone owes me a favor.
Oh, sure.
And that's really played off of. But I mean, I like, man, as much as I don't really like what happens in this volume, like the different, the different things that he has to battle against, some of the things that are more gory than they need to be. I really do like the character of John Constantine so far. I mean, he's just like, he's kind of morally gray and very humanized for not knowing if he's human or not.
Right.
I think what's interesting is that I feel like modern readers and people who have been exposed to Constantine largely through the show, or wasn't he on, what is it, like Adventurers of Tomorrow or
Legends of Tomorrow,
Hidden Temple, and like I feel like they see him more as like a snappy kind of man of action hero. And what's so interesting, and obviously having read this like volume, I think people who get that idea of Constantine and then they go back and they read the comic, and I feel like Constantine New 52 didn't help, because I think Constantine New 52 also sort of made him like a super snappy, super quippy, and he was always kind of quippy, but like more droll, I would say. But they turned him into like a very Americanized man of action hero. And then if you go back and read Constantine, this comic, it feels in a lot of ways to me like there obviously are moments of horror and terrifying things, but it's also very like slice of life, like British day-to-day living of him basically being like, hey, England kind of sucks right now, and it's really slow paced. I don't know, like I find, and maybe, you know, Kate, tell me if this is true for you or not, but like I think that was kind of like a weird issue, is that like the current image of Constantine seems very different than where the book starts. I feel like it ramps a little after volume 1, but like volume 1 feels like, you know, it's slow.
Yeah. Yeah, I because of the kind of the episodic nature of these issues, it kind of felt like there was periods of time missing between the issues, and that's something that I missed. Like, I want to know what John's day-to-day life looks like when he's not battling some kind of evil, but
smoking. I mean, it's just not. I mean, you should be able to read between the lines. It's just constant smoking.
But yeah, it did feel like time was moving slowly, but also there were a lot more words per page than I'm used to. And then the issues, at least issue 1 was very long in terms of page count. I'm not sure if the rest of the issues were long, but I want to say that there are 10 issues in this one volume, which is also more than I'm used to. So
yeah, like when they collected Constantine, they sort of, I don't know if they ever really collected it in like an ARC trade format, because it's such an older book. So I think when they did finally get around to collecting it, it's more Omni based.
Yeah, they're much bigger volumes. But, you know, as much as I want to talk about Constantine, I do want to talk about Iron Man, just to get your thoughts about, you know, your depiction of Iron Man, I guess, and what you thought of this book coming out in 86, and, you know, how Iron Man is portrayed, Nick. I know we kind of talked about it already, but maybe some other, I don't know if you had any other high-level notes about it.
I mean, sure. I mean, we could definitely talk about Constantine more, but I mean, I get fine.
Listen,
no, like honestly, like I think if I read that book now again, like he's making deals with demons and shit, but I think at the end I would be like, you know what, I really don't like this smoking thing. Like that's what really bothers me, you know. Anyway, no, it's this Iron Man issue is wild. Like my one regret is I wish I could read the actual physical issue with like the ads in it, because that's always like number one thing I love about old comics is like, give me, I've said this a million times on the show, just give me the fucking Nintendo ads. Give me the Nintendo ads.
Because where's my book, you know, my table book,
coffee table Nintendo ad, please.
All the ads from comic books from like the 70s to the mid 90s, please.
Yeah, and all of like the Kool-Aid ads too, where they're like, hey, if you save 450 Kool-Aid things, you can get Metroid 2. For your, I mean, I remember that's burned in my brain like forever and ever. Like 30 Kool-Aid tabs equals Metroid 2 for the Game Boy.
I will go on eBay and get you a copy of this Metroid game if it means we can stop trying to collect these old Kool-Aid tabs, please.
Oh man, wait till you see the collection of Kool-Aid tabs I have. Let me see, what else do I want to say about this? So yeah, Tony, again, like it really feels like Elon Musk, because he's like, you know what? I think there's money to be made in privatizing space. And I'm like, what is this book? Are you going to like, and then on the next page, he launches a car into space. And
right.
No, I'm just kidding. That would be, I would have lost my mind.
I thought you were being serious, because that's totally believable of an Iron Man comic.
Yeah. And gosh, what else happens here? yeah, so there's this woman named Bethany Cabe. Again, like I said, never heard of her before, but I guess she becomes Iron Woman and War Machine 2.0. And Tony's like, I love you. And she's like, I need to go back to Germany for a while. Bye.
Sure.
And then he gets sad. The eye thing was jarring, obviously. I thought the art was actually pretty good. It was pretty good. Mm-hmm. This is the Tony Stark mustache era, which one of those, which feels very 80s. It's definitely okay. I'm all right with that. Mm-hmm. Also interesting, 90% of this book's text is Tony talking to himself, like basically narrating his thought process of like how smart he is. And, you basically get to see him work through everything. Like 90% of this is just thought bubbles of his own internal dialogue. And that also very much feels like a thing of its time. Like, I think readers' tolerance for that sort of thing is somewhat diminished. And also, a show don't tell, the modern emphasis on show don't tell kind of gets away from that. But
this is the thing that I noticed about like the Black Panther comic is that there's a lot of captions. But I think the thought bubble and the caption thing, I think we've kind of, we've talked about this before, the thought bubbles have just gone away with rare exception. And now they've turned into captions. And I think if you look at a modern day Iron Man book, and I'll admit I haven't read an Iron Man book in probably 4 or 5 years, but you look at a modern day Iron Man book and there's a lot of captions still, and it's Tony thinking to himself and planning and doing things. I think this idea that incredibly smart people think a lot inside their head to make plans and actions and all this other stuff, that they've got actions and ideas for everything that they want to do, I think is common when you're trying to portray that kind of character, someone who's always thinking about the next 4, 5, 6, 7 steps in chess. And Tony Stark is definitely that person. But it sounds to me like this is just a very lazy way for the writers to be like, and Tony's going to do this next, and here's what he's thinking about how he's going to do it, and probably doing some like offhand remarks about things that he wouldn't say out loud, because that's just who Tony Stark is.
Right. And so it becomes a question of like, maybe thought bubbles aren't the best way of doing this, but like, what's the alternative? And as you said, I think really it's just thought bubbles evolving just into captions, because the thought bubble is no longer apparently the thought bubble is not okay. But if you turn it into a square and you put it in the corner where it's out of the way, that's good. Like, I feel like that deserves the Drake meme, where he's like pushing it away. And then he's like, that's my shit. Like, that's the thought bubble evolution to the caption. So if someone wants to make that meme, it's there. It's there. But no, honestly, like, not a bad book. I think I got lucky with the fact that it seems like it was the beginning of a new arc. The villain seems stupid. Tony is obviously very, very smart and ahead of his time. And at the end of the book, like, he has a couple meetings with people, and then he's like, hey, I got the money. And then he goes and puts the power plant for his space station in orbit. And I'm like, what an unrealistic depiction of the timeline for the creation of like space stations. Like, I hope this didn't give anyone like false hope about like the timeline, because Tony's like, hey, all I got to do is take other people's money, and then I can go put this thing in space with my shoulder pad armor. And totally
normal thing to do.
I hope nobody like growing up was like, oh man, it's so easy to put a space. I don't know. I mean, if the worst thing you got out of comics from the 80s was like unrealistic expectations about the evolution of space innovation, then I suppose that's fine. Right. But again, interesting. Really, it's Elon Musk. Like, this book is it's Elon Musk.
Right. Which, we all come full circle when we think about Iron Man 2, and Elon Musk shows up in that, and
oh my god, I forgot. Oh, I forgot about that.
Now we know. So yeah, I guess I just wanted just some final thoughts on Black Panther. I feel like this book is, like I said, very in your face about like a lot of the political stuff. I think that everyone should read it. It's very good. It's a good issue, just the number 4. And I think if you read the whole series itself,
I mean, the fact that you got a Dennis Cohen issue is fantastic.
Yeah, and I mean, Cohen's art
gifted penciler.
Is very, very good. That was one of the thing I wanted to talk about, was like the art in this is stupendous. There is it's a shame to read this book in guided view. I will say that, because the full page spreads for this, or not the full page spreads, but just seeing the full page as it's laid out. Cohen does some really interesting stuff on a couple of pages for parallelizing things that are happening at the same time. And you don't see that in the guided view, but like to pull back and actually see it. And the last couple of pages have some very interesting pieces of art. So, yeah, I think if you can, check this book out. But yeah, the art in this is stupendous. I mean, I've seen the stuff for Constantine. I haven't seen this Iron Man, but from the clips you've shown me, Nick, it feels very, very 80s and very bright in a way that kind of makes me feel like I need to turn the contrast down on a picture. But this one's really good. It's got a lot of dark greens and bright oranges and browns and stuff. And like the way they depict the forest and some of the machinery that Black Panther uses is really, really cool. So I would definitely recommend it. But I don't know, we are running a little bit out of tape. So did you guys have any final thoughts? Kate, any final thoughts about reading a book that came out the year and month that you were born?
Oh gosh, if I had to do it again, I would read something else. Probably
all
the Black Panther book.
Real good tonal shift at the end of this up. Real good.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
It's going to be real hard to take this back to positive, and I thought it wouldn't be. I thought I would be the one to blame for that.
I would absolutely do this again, and read something else that came out the same month that I was born, or the same month that something happened in the world, or I turned 5 or something. Like, just
interesting.
Just knowing what comics were like during a certain point in my life that is not when I was reading comics is really insightful, I suppose. Knowing that you guys both had a different experience with comics that came out around the same time as Hellblazer is encouraging. Yeah.
Well, I think we definitely want to do this again. I think this is really fun. Nick, what any quick final thoughts? Quickly.
Yeah. I would want to highlight one other moment that I absolutely loved. So MODOK comes in and he smashes in the ceiling of this convention center, and Tony Stark deploys these like special beams that hold up the ceiling, and then basically gives a narration to all of the terrified spectators that this technology that is saving their lives is a proof of concept of what he's going to use on the space station. So even in those moments, always be presenting, right? Always be presenting. Like,
yes,
make that, and then have Alec Baldwin pointing to the sign on the wall.
Yes, I love it.
Tony has a one-track mind in this book, and I love it. It's part of me actually may or may not try to read the issues that follow this.
Please, oh my gosh, please let us know if you do, because I really want to hear more about this ABC stuff, this always be capitalizing mentality that Tony seems to have in the 80s. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Kate and Nick, thank you guys for doing this. Thanks to everyone on the Discord. I want to shout that out. We've been recording this episode live on Discord, so make sure you jump on our Discord at ircbpodcast.com/Discord. And remember that you can follow us all on Twitter. You can follow Kate at Kate Elfier. You can follow Nick at Death Star Plans, and you can follow me at Mike Rappin and the show at IRCB Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. And we have a YouTube that's out there. Like, if you want to listen to our episodes on YouTube for some reason, it's out there. For some reason, some of our episodes keep getting age restricted, but I've been repealing and they've gotten unbanned. I don't know. It's weird. But if you want, go subscribe there too. You can listen to all of our episodes.
The show and our mini subscriber-only episodes are powered by fans like you on Patreon. Join now at patreon.com/IRCB podcast.
And if you haven't already, please rate and review our show. 5 stars would be great on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also join us on Discord at IRCB Podcast /Discord, and make sure to tell a friend or two about the show, please.
Infinity Shred is the best band in the universe. They do all of our music. We can't thank them enough. I want to say thank you again to Kate and Nick for being on this episode. Thank you to everyone out there who listens to the show. Thank you to everyone who's listening right now on Discord. And, just thank you for being yourself. We really appreciate that in these hard times. And until next time, comics are good, and so are you.